Where we're going, we don't need roads, says the Liberals. And they're talking about Canada, of course, because in a post-national state that's worried about climate change, you stop building roads, according to these absolute lunatics. Right? Who needs roads, right? Like, let's just let it go to, let's just let it fade and we'll use bicycles on the roads. How's that? Hey, no, that's a terrible idea. It's an awful idea. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're starting with the roads thing. And Dan, who is an MP for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, Shadow Minister of Rural Economic Development and Connectivity, Vice Chair of the Standing Committee on the Environment, he says Liberal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault's senior official has admitted that the Trudeau government is, in fact, considering banning construction and expansion of roads. This news comes following Minister Guilbeault's radical emergency decree that will kill thousands of Canadian forestry and mining jobs. Guilbeault previously stated that Liberals would no longer build new roads and then backpedaled on his comments following outrage from Canadians. Now we know that Trudeau's radical environment minister is, in fact, considering banning road construction. Minister Guilbeault is hellbent on ending personal vehicle ownership in Canada. He is banning gas-powered vehicles. He is increasing fuel costs with his carbon tax. He wants to ban road construction. Meanwhile, he's never owned a personal vehicle himself. More to come. So here is the exchange in the committee, and very interesting exchange, if you ask me. I'm going to have to turn it up. I'll turn it up right now. We'll see if I can turn it up before the video starts. How's that? Sometimes I'm trying to gauge how much to turn it up because I can turn it up too much. I hope I haven't.
Is the government considering prohibiting road construction through this emergency order? Is the government considering prohibiting road construction through this emergency order?
I'll defer to my colleagues. Yeah.
The issue of roads and their closure of roads would be one thing that would be under consideration in the context of the development of an order. The order has not been developed.
It is being considered.
Could be one of the things considered, yes.
So they are considering prohibiting road construction through this emergency order? Yes.
The order has not been developed yet.
They are considering. That was...
It would be something that would be subject of consideration.
It's so maddening. It's so the answer to the question is yes. The answer is yes, they're considering it. Well, the order is not made yet, but they're considering it. Yes. It's like pulling teeth. Holy smokeronies. We have to talk about the Summit of the Future. And the Summit of the Future is a UN resolution, and they're trying to, I think, reimagine what the UN is. Originally, the United Nations was something to combat Soviet Russia, was something to not be a governing body at all. And now they're trying to make it into a governing body. And that starts, I guess, with what's happened over this past weekend. People are upset about it, and I'll show you that. And Peter Sweden says, while you were sleeping, the United Nations just voted for the Pact for the Future without asking you. It's been reported as the successor to the UN Agenda 2030. So it's a rebranding, right? Even I didn't know about this until after they adopted it. And so that's interesting. I talked about it the other day. Robert Kennedy's talking about this. He says, due to their failure with the pandemic treaty, the United Nations has decided to move on this issue through the General Assembly, giving the Secretary General the emergency powers they could not get for the WHO. The United Nations Pact for the Future is an unconstitutional, in the United States, attempt to pass a treaty that allows international organizations to violate the sovereignty of the United States of America by declaring a global state of emergency without our consent. It is not good for the United States. It's not good for the rest of the world. To express your concerns, call the United States ambassador to the United Nations at 212 for, whatever. It's in an administration where I participate, says Robert Kennedy, you won't have to do this because he'll call them, right? And that'll be enough. So the Pact for the Future is damaging and worrying. And this guy, people know this guy. Wiretap Media is sharing, I can't remember this guy's name, but he's introducing a reporter who's concerned about this. And the end of the report, and I don't think we'll listen to the whole thing, but I'm going to skip to the end. His summary of the whole thing is pretty good, I think. And he says, I think this is a different way to get the same result as climate lockdowns, as COVID lockdowns, by a different name through these unelected bureaucracies. And one of the things I wanted to point out before we move on as well is somebody said unelected. Hold on a second. Peter Sweden said they voted for the Pact for the Future without asking you. The United Nations doesn't ask us anything. Like, you never get a say in what the United Nations does. The United Nations wakes up one day and they put Iraq on the Council for Women, you know what I mean? Or leading the Council for Women or something to that effect. The United Nations couldn't possibly care less what you think about their policies. They won't care either. And so they won't ask us. They won't ask Canada. They won't ask me, Mark. They won't ask us about any of this. Okay, back to the video. Here we go.
At the UN headquarters for the historic Summit of the Future.
Oh, sorry, that's way too loud. I'm sorry. Apologies about that. Here we go.
As they're calling it, their intention at this summit is to sign what's being called the Pact for the Future. So these globalists are getting together and signing something that perhaps you didn't sign off on. What's actually in this Pact for the Future? Let's ask Derek Brose, investigative journalist from The Last American Vagabond. Why should we be concerned what these guys are voting on right now?
Yeah, thank you for that, Clayton. So the reason Americans and really people all over the world need to know about this is because in minor resistance way, all of the major nations you would expect are on board. The Pact for the Future is calling for a few main things. The first part is to include an emergency platform, and this emergency platform would allow UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to declare an emergency at any point. It's very similar to what we saw in the language of the pandemic agreement, the pandemic treaty, that people were resistant, but unfortunately there's less awareness about this. What the language says specifically, that if there are quote, global shocks, which shock multiple regions of the world, then they could invoke this emergency platform, which would give the UN more powers to act. Now, what exactly would come from that, we don't know, because unfortunately, we have seen 3 drafts that have been released previously, the most recent one on August 27th. But as of this recording and as we're going into the summit, there has been no final version released to the public. And I think this is being done on purpose. So that's one, of the scary, worrisome aspects, is we're not even seeing what they potentially sign, even though we really have no say. These people are unelected. So they're not even letting the public know what's going on. But the versions we have seen before specifically state that there needs to be an emergency platform. And when they talk about shocks, this could include a new claimed pandemic. This could include war, economic turmoil, famine. Really, it's an endless. Obviously, climate change is on that list, but it's a pretty endless list of whatever they want to claim. They then invoke this emergency platform as part of the Pact for the Future. And then what comes next, none of us really know, but definitely what they are trying to do is to give the UN more power. There's discussions around UN 2.0, that it's time to remake the UN because, we're at the 80th anniversary.
I'll leave it there. At the end, he basically says this is locked down by another name. And I don't disagree with them. They're talking about this here. Take a stand says the United Nations is making a power move to become the one world government via the Pact for the Future. They've rewritten their role for the world so that about any event allows the United Nations to automatically take control operationally across the world. Apparently, since the WHO was unable to get control of the world during a pandemic, the UN has come up with this plan. A summit to finalize is September 21st to 23rd. So they voted for that. And people don't know. This woman here says, I don't know. At the end, she said, I don't know if this is like they voted for this so it's in action, or they voted for this so they're going to move it to more study. But I'll just back it up to 130 here. This is probably going to be too fast as well. No, it's good. I don't know why the videos are playing strangely today. The beginning of the last video played fine for me before, and then for no reason decided to not play fine. And this is going to be more quiet. I'm going to try and turn it up. But last time I turned it up too much, and I forget about the volume, so apologies about that. It's just a little control device, like it's just a little indicator that it's changed, so it's not often obvious. Okay, here we go.
Absolutely changes the case, the character of the United Nations. It was never meant to be a governing organization, and they are doing this through this thing called a silence procedure, as opposed to out in the open and debating it and having a vote.
Oh, so she's saying previously, I guess, earlier in the video, she's saying she doesn't know what the structure of the vote is and et cetera, but they're doing it under this silence procedure instead of having an open vote for it. And it just doesn't seem above board. Here is the Japanese asking for LNG and Canada saying, no, thank you very much. Rex Glacier says Japan asks for natural gas. Trudeau offers lectures on decarbonizing. Trudeau denies natural gas to another ally in favor of fictive agenda. On LNG, Canada turned away Germany and then Japan. This country cannot keep doing that. No better friend than lying Trudeau. So Canada's PM says Prime Minister Trudeau met with the Prime Minister of Japan, reaffirming the strong Canada-Japan bond. They discussed shared priorities, including expanding trade, energy, their support for Ukraine, and more. It's a litmus test. Everybody has to support Ukraine, apparently. Ridiculous. Canada Proud is reporting that Justin Trudeau will be on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert on Monday night. Does anybody actually watch late night television anymore? Are there people who watch that? People my age who watch that? I can't imagine. Like, Stephen Colbert was dancing around talking about getting vaccinated and hating on anti-vax people. And anybody with sense knew that what was happening was propaganda and like wasn't interested in filling their brain with such nonsense, right? So are there people left who watch this crap? Really? It seems like all the late night shows are kind of collapsing. Nobody's watching Kimmel. I don't even know who the late hosts are when at one point in time, like Daily Show and Colbert were later. I guess they were competing on Comedy Central with David Letterman and things, but Conan was later, like 12:30, and then there was the British guy, and there was a couple of other there was that thin pointy guy who used to write for Saturday Night Live, and he was pretty funny too. I can't remember his name, but it's Seth something, Seth Meyers, is that it? Maybe. So there was a pretty funny stack of like late night comedians and things. And now they're all just propaganda nonsense with celebrities who probably hang out at Puff Daddy parties. Right. And it's like, I don't think that I'm interested in watching that kind of quote unquote entertainment, you know? And so I'm surprised other people are, and I'm not at all surprised. There's been a mosquito stalking me all show. And I'm not at all surprised that Justin Trudeau is going on something like that. But even so, is this supposed to be a win for the Canadian Prime Minister? Is that supposed to like make him humanized for the Canadian public going on an American late night talk show? I don't know. In the United Kingdom, Dr. Anthony Hinton says it was not COVID, but lockdowns that destroyed our lives, from newborns to pensioners. Never again. And so the Telegraph says how COVID destroyed our lives, from newborns to pensioners, which is just not true. This is just trying to reimagine history and to have us blame COVID for something that was actually government response. The government's fault, not COVID's fault. And COVID, I said the other day, the reason that they had to change the name to COVID was because Wuhan flu still had flu in it, and they would have had to classify it as a flu. They wanted it to be a new, novel disorder, right? And so that's why they had to change it to COVID. COVID's different than the flu, but it's not, because it's just the flu. Right? Always was. Alberta secession. Let's move on to elections stuff. Alberta secession says, wonder why Jagmeet Singh will not call an election? We have so lost our way where our elected representatives put their own interests, their own beliefs, their own benefits above their sworn obligations. Canada is broken. Alex Zoltan says, Jagmeet Singh is unlikely to win his own seat back, polling close to third position in Burnaby South. Singh lost his original bid for a seat in 2011, leading the NDP from outside of Parliament for years before eventually winning in 2019 by-election in Burnaby. So and it's now a toss-up seat. So, and he's trending down where the Liberals are trending up. And so that's pretty interesting if the leader of the NDP failed to hold his own seat and lose to the Conservatives or the Liberals, right? Especially in this climate. So we'll see how all of that works out. They're trying to position Jagmeet Singh as being the next prime minister. Like, they're trying to say that he's going to win because people don't want Pierre Poilievre, which is obviously not true. It seems that Canada does want Pierre Poilievre if you look at the polls and believe them, which I don't believe the polls necessarily, but I do think there's a big swelling of support for Pierre Poilievre. So there you go. But fundamentally, I don't think that Jagmeet Singh has a realistic shot at becoming prime minister in the next election, but it seems like they're trying to sell that. Keir Starmer, I didn't think would have a realistic shot either. I thought he was more of a Jeremy Corbyn style person. Jeremy Corbyn was a weak leader, right? And so I was surprised when he won, and what he's done since is jaw-dropping, right? And not in a good way. Here's CBC Watcher, and this is a minute 40, and I think the context is interesting, but maybe we'll just play it from a minute on here. He's answering the questions Vassie's putting to him, basically saying, like, people aren't happy, but you're saying they are happy. It's kind of weird. And here's the exchange with Decloux. Part of it. Here we go.
That people often feel unsatisfied with where they are in life. However, having campaigned in La Salle, Verdun, et Mar, I heard very little dissatisfaction with the policies that we're putting into place to help grow the economy, to support the middle class, fight against climate change, and all the things that people in general very strongly support.
And I heard you make those comments this week, and with great respect, they were confusing to me. Essentially, that people like your party and what your government is doing, but they don't like their own lot in life. Isn't that kind of blaming the voter for the outcome?
No, I think it's fair, and it's fine that voters express their lack of satisfaction with where they are in their personal lives, where they see our planet going with the wars and the climate crisis and the...
I don't think Canadian voters are expressing dissatisfaction with their lot in life. I think they're expressing dissatisfaction with the Liberals stealing their money and sending it to Ukraine. David's responding to Decloux, and he says, what's Trudeau's Liberals' winning message to Canadians going into the 2025 election? We're not the problem, you are. Which, of course, has been their messaging since, I don't know, 2019, pretty much, I think. So, yeah, and this is just the 25 seconds of Vassy saying, it sounds like you're blaming Canadians and not taking any responsibility for yourself. And he says, no, they're just upset about their lot in life. You know, it's nothing to do with us. And the other pivot as well to pay attention to is saying that it's international issues, it's climate change, it's other things that are out of their control. It's not, it's a lot of the policies. It's like saying COVID is the problem when really it was the policies that were in response to COVID that were the problem. COVID is a flu. Whatever, right? Who cares? Roman Baber is responding to this. The annual price of housing starts in Canada is down 22%. First market reading, Mark Carney takes up the Prime Minister advisor job. His company solicits Ottawa for $10 billion. This week in Canada, says Roman Baber, sexual assault and robberies are surging. Prime Minister and cabinet stifle investigations into foreign interference. New housing starts at record lows. Mark Carney's new Liberal advisor seeks $10 billion from government for a fund. Block NDP. No need for an election. What corruption? We can't see anything. We haven't looked, but we can't see anything. Oh my gosh. Here is Peter Kelly, and he's talking about how in BC there's an election coming up, and he is disgusted that Rustad would use people, folks experiencing homelessness as campaign props. How dare he, right? How dare he? And the NDP would never use people as campaign props, says Amy Ham. And here, of course, are the NDP using people as props. Which is really, I mean, it's sad because this, do you think this lends credibility to whatever cause this is? It's got the Pride Progress flag, which is the communist conquest flag at this point in time. And it says protect the, I don't know, long acronym that's supposed to stand for LGBT, but doesn't anymore. Protect those communities, right? Protect the communist communities. And all of these people who are standing around, like the man in the purple leggings and high heels, he's not lending credibility here. The other man who's taller than the first man in the muumuu, you know, like, and then the tallest two men behind the speaker at the podium there who are pretending that they're women. This is not like, oh yes, this is what Canada stands for. This is pure propaganda and utilizing these people as props to show that whoever you are, you belong. It doesn't matter how crazy you are, right? Like, so, wow. Canada's really eye-opening these days. Here's the food professor. Let's talk about money and misuse of tax dollars. Food professor says nobody was asking the Bank of Canada how they calculated the impact of the carbon tax on inflation. So we did. This is their response. And so, like, that's good work, right? And he's referencing this tweet. He says, this is the email we received from the Bank of Canada last year regarding calculations on how the carbon tax impacts inflation. The bank was not pleased with us posting it, revealed the simplistic nature of calculations, excluding a significant portion of the economy, including food. So that's pretty wild. Dear Professor Charlebois, Thank you for your email of September 16th, 23, when you asked for more information about our calculation of the inflationary impact of the carbon tax. The bank's estimate for the contribution of the carbon tax to the inflationary rate is calculated by determining the impact of the tax on the most important items in the CPI basket to which the tax is directly applied: gasoline, heating oil, and natural gas. Using the respective weights in the CPI bracket, because the tax varies across provinces and territories, we perform all the calculations by jurisdiction. First, we start by determining the carbon price in each province and territory, then multiply those prices by the conversion factor used by the Government of Canada. To take the example of gasoline in Ontario, the carbon price rose by $15 a ton in April 23, so the impact of that change on gasoline prices in Ontario is 15 times 2.2 divided by 1,000, conversion factor, equals 0.033 per liter. Next, we apply the Ontario sales tax, 13%, to get the overall impact of the carbon tax on gasoline prices in Ontario. 0.033 times 1.13 equals 0.0373 per liter. The next step is to see how much that impact represents in terms of the increase in gasoline prices in percentage terms, and it's 3%. So the impact on Ontario's annual inflation rate is 3% times 3.77 weight of the gasoline in Ontario CPI basket equals 0.1131 percentage points. And the impact of Canada's annual inflation rate is 0.045 percentage points. We repeat this process for the three items in the CPI basket for every province and territory. After doing these calculations and summarizing the results, we find the carbon tax added at about 0.15 percentage points, rounded up to the second decimal point, to the national CPI inflation rate in April 2023, which is the last time we did the calculations. So it's really, like, I mean, it is interesting how you can get math to pretty much do anything. Like if you hyper focus down into this little area, you can make the math look like, oh yeah, it's really small impact. But the increase in the prices of everything increases the prices of everything, right? Like if you're a business and now it costs more money to transport your goods, it's going to increase the price in a meaningful way. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't think that this is a legitimate calculation of the impact of the carbon tax, but that's what the Bank of Canada is using. And I'm not mathy enough to give you a replacement that you should use, but it seems like we shouldn't use that one because it seems like it doesn't take enough into account. Our MSM is the enemy of democracy says, remember when the vaccine factory the Liberals planned to build wasn't built and $150 million just disappeared? It was in Champagne's riding. So that's interesting, right? And Rick is an MP. He's an MP for South Shore St. Margaret's. And he said, whistleblower returned to committee to share even more explosive testimony, testifies Minister Champagne was corrupt and deceitful, tampered with reports to protect corrupt liberal insiders, and lied to a parliamentary committee about his involvement. The only ones that should be put on blast are the Trudeau Liberals. I think we need tribunals. I think we need to remove all oversight from the House of Commons and from committees that are structured along with the government, because that gives far too much power to the sitting government. And like transparency. And again, transparency should come from like bug bonuses, right? You should have, or bug hunting bonuses. And that's a software term where if you find a bug, the company pays you money, rewards you in some way. So the government emails should be released by default after a certain burn time, like 3 days. You send an email, 3 days later it becomes public. If there's an ongoing negotiation or something, then everything gets published. As soon as the negotiation is finalized, everything is published. All emails from everybody involved, everything, period. No expectation of privacy. You work for the public. You work with public funds. You're paid with public funds. Period. Everything, including your bank account. You want to work in the public? Great. We're going to scrutinize your bank account because we want to make sure that you're not taking money on the side, right, Randy? Right? Like that should be standard. And if you don't want that, then don't work in the public sector. Like simple, right? You want to do good, then we're going to make sure you do good because we don't take your word for it. Because a lot of people who said that ended up using their position to bolster themselves and not actually do the job that they're supposed to do. So whistleblower accuses Liberals of egregious cover-up over controversy at Green Tech Fund. A former Sustainable Development Technology Canada employee accused the agency of mismanaging taxpayer money and misconduct by senior officials, including Champagne. So that's pretty wild stuff, right? And is anybody going to do anything about it now or when Mr. Poilievre becomes prime minister or anything like that? I have not seen any evidence to indicate that that is on the horizon or in the pipeline. Holly Doan says one of Canada's biggest telecom companies asks for the same newsroom subsidies paid to the newspapers. Quote, tax credit as it stands leaves the most sought news content in Canada, that of broadcast journalism, behind. So the like CTV, Bell, Rogers, who own different, journalist things. I'm sure Global News is going to try and get in on this as well. But I don't want the government subsidizing media. If nobody's watching their crap media, it should die. Period. They shouldn't get infusions of money from me that I have no say in at all, right? Like, no, thank you. They're not doing a good job, and they haven't been doing a good job, and they don't deserve subsidies. So, but here we are. They're begging for money, right? And that's not great. Carol Saab is talking about this TVO piece, and the TVO piece says the way cities have been allowed to generate revenue hasn't changed since 1867. I don't know if she's lying purposely or if she's just uninformed. I'm not sure which, but like things have changed enormously since 1867. 1867 is the birth of the country. And like it used to be, and not very long ago, it used to be that the money that people had to pay to build houses was a small amount of money, a couple $1,000s here and there, right? And so it wasn't a lot of money, and a lot of the services that the city offered were paid for by property taxes, right? And so the property taxes were small, so the services were relatively small. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 90s, who knows when, something broke. And I think that it had to do, there was a time when like a house cost $20,000, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, people's finances got orders of magnitude bigger. Houses cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, now millions of dollars, right? And when you get money's complicated. And so in order to use money correctly, because it's complicated, the more you have, the more complicated it is, right? And the more opportunities you have to win and lose, right? Like you could, if you invest a lot of money, if you invest $10 and your stock goes up 10 times, then you've made $100. But if you invest $1 million and it goes up 10 times, then you've made $1 billion, right? Like there's a lot more money if you leverage, but then if you lose it, you lose a lot more too. And so like fundamentally, she's saying that so I think that money's been inflated in order to confuse us, in order to make it more difficult to use and to more easily draw people up and draw people down, right? Like it's the $100,000 swings were unheard of in the 30s, right? Like for personal wealth, like you didn't hear about that very often. A millionaire was way out of reach, and now millionaires are made and broken every day, right? And it doesn't even matter. And then and still we're devaluing the money and creating more money flying around, and it doesn't mean you're rich. There were in the 1980s a job that paid $60,000 or even $30,000 was like a lot of money, and now that's almost entry level, right? And that's wild. So like things have drastically changed with regards to how the funding of tax dollars and how developers in cities pay for developing new properties and new housing. And that's orders of magnitude bigger as well. And now instead of a couple of $1,000s, it's a $50,000, $60,000. And when it's all said and done, the developer owes a lot of money to the city. And then they use that money instead of taxes, right? So like you pay for that on your mortgage for however long you have the mortgage. And they're saying the way they've been allowed to generate revenue hasn't changed since 1867. Nonsense. The nature of money's changed since 1860. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to canadapoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.